The Kung Fu Panda Trilogy is secretly brilliant. After rewatching the entire trilogy back to back to back in one day, I was astonished with how deep and powerful a story about Kung Fu fighting animals can be. With the inclusion of Kung Fu Panda 4 into this franchise, it's time to look back at the trilogy that started it all and if it still holds up as one of the best animated trilogies. In this video, I'm going to go through each of the original 3 Kung Fu Panda movies and talk about what makes stories like these so special. Let's begin. Each Kung Fu Panda movie has a different arc for Po, but it's maybe more important to ask what all 3 movies are about. The Kung Fu Panda Trilogy is always asking the same question: who are you? Every time Po is thrusted into a new adventure, he ends up asking himself this question. Now, some may look at this as redundant, but we need to remember what kind of film Kung Fu Panda is. It's a kid's story. No, that doesn't mean it has less to say than a Christopher Nolan film. It means its major goal is to help children answer questions about their lives. And what bigger question is there for a kid to ask than, who am I? Where do I belong in this world? What makes me happy? Kung Fu Panda begins with a dream of becoming something bigger and better, only to wake up to being told what to do by your parents. An important thing to note about this dream is that it's not just about Po dreaming that he is a Kung Fu master, it's also about the perception people have of him. Remember that for later. Po's introduction is quite similar to a lot of heroes' journeys stories, but there's one thing that makes Po's story different. Just like other heroes, Po has dreams of becoming more than what he's supposed to be. Just like other heroes, Po isn't happy with his current direction in life. And just like other heroes, Po doesn't feel like he belongs. I really liked the first scene we have with Po's dad. Right away, in just the first few minutes, we see what Po wants in life, what his life currently is, and how he feels about it. Now, with a lot of these other stories that I mentioned, they have active protagonists. An active protagonist is a character that makes decisions that push the story forward. Instead of letting random events dictate their actions, they make decisions that start a chain reaction of events. In storytelling, it's really important to have active characters because when characters make decisions, that is when you learn more about who they are. You learn more about their personality, their goals, how they act under pressure, etc. When it comes to Po, he is not an active character. Sure, he has dreams of becoming a Kung Fu master, but is he doing anything to accomplish those dreams? We can tell he doesn't care about making noodles, but is he doing anything to change his life direction? Nope. Po is doing none of those things. So since Po is not an active character, that must mean he's a bad character, right? Wrong. He makes an active attempt to go see the announcement of the Dragon Warrior, and we see how hard he tries to watch it even when he's locked out of the room. This shows us how passionate Po is about Kung Fu, even though he doesn't practice it. When it comes to actually learning Kung Fu, Po doesn't make active attempts to achieve his dreams because he doesn't believe he can. Po's fat, he's awkward, he's clumsy. How can he become a Kung Fu master? He's not special. Shit, the closest thing he'll ever be to that is playing with the action figures in his room or watching others fight from the sidelines. Also, how could he become a Kung Fu master when he's expected to uphold the family business of making noodles? When he wakes up and goes downstairs to help his dad, he's reminded how his destiny is to make noodles. So why would Po try to learn Kung Fu? Well, that's what Kung Fu Panda is about. It's essentially a story about believing in yourself. It's about embracing what others see as flaws as a fundamental part of who you are. It's about learning that there's no secret ingredient to being great. The ingredient is everything that makes you, you. So let's go through the film and see how Po's journey teaches these lessons. When Po first gets selected to become the Dragon Warrior, no one believes in him, especially himself. Master Shifu makes it very clear Po does not belong here. When he sees the Furious 5 train, Po sees he is nothing like them. He's not only not able to complete the tasks, but he looks like a total idiot in doing so. And Po is reminded over and over again how he physically represents the opposite of a Kung Fu master. All his heroes, the people he was playing with their action figures of in the beginning of the movie, are making fun of him behind his back. Po never asked for this. He was accidentally put into a position to be selected as the Dragon Warrior. Now he has to listen to others constantly point out all his insecurities. Even one of his heroes tells him that he's a disgrace to Kung Fu. Po is reminded that he isn't special. So why doesn't he quit? As Shifu points out, Po appears to gladly take beating after beating to stay one of his students. In one of the more powerful scenes of the movie, Po tells Shifu Shifu that the reason he doesn't quit is because every other day of his life being a normal guy was more painful than all of the abuse he received the past few days. Fuck man, that was such a powerful moment. Po goes on to ask Shifu how he can turn this fat panda into the Dragon Warrior. Po's self-image is so negative he believes that in order to become the Dragon Warrior, he needs to completely change. This thought process is probably so common in kids today. We live in a world today where everyone constantly needs to show the best version of themselves. With social media, we assume that people have it all figured out. We assume that we're somehow behind in life or that we're a major disappointment. We assume that in order to be great, we need to change. The first half of the film highlights all of Po's insecurities and that he needs some great transformation if he wants to become the Dragon Warrior. The second half is all about proving Po wrong. At first, Shifu doesn't know how to turn Po into a Dragon Warrior. In one of the next few scenes, however, it starts to click for Shifu. He can't train Po like he did the Furious 5 or Tai Lung. He needs to train Po differently because Po is different, and different is not bad. There's no style of teaching that works for everyone. Shifu realizes this and adapts. This also perfectly plays into his backstory with Tai Lung, but more on that later. We get a really cool training montage where Shifu feeds into all of Po's strengths. He trains him with food and teaches Po to use his body to his advantage. It's a great moment that makes Po not so insecure about his flaws. Shifu then believes Po is ready to read the Dragon Scroll. This scroll is going to give Po the secret power to becoming great, right? Well, it turns out the scroll is blank and only shows a reflection of yourself. Po at first feels defeated. Even though he had all this great training with Shifu, he hasn't accepted that he could be great. Po has imposter syndrome up until he learns the true meaning of the scroll. After his dad tells him that there is no secret ingredient to his secret ingredient soup, it finally clicks for Po. There is no secret ingredient to being great. There's no single characteristic that makes someone better than everyone else. What makes you great is you. What a perfect message to tell a kid. This movie teaches Po that it doesn't matter that he is fat or that he is clumsy. That is a part of what makes Po great. Po had all these expectations, and when he tried to live up to them, it never worked. He was trying to be that noodle boy his father always wanted him to be, but that didn't make him happy. When Po first trained with Shifu, he tried to train like the Furious 5, but that didn't work. All the time, kids have expectations put onto them. Sometimes kids live up to them, and sometimes they don't. But just because they don't, that doesn't mean they aren't great. Po doesn't defeat Tai Lung by fighting like the Furious 5. He wins by being himself. Po basically began the story and ended the story with the exact same physicality. The only thing that changed was his perspective of himself. This is maybe one of the most important lessons you can teach a kid, that it's okay to be you. You don't need to be someone you're not. Again, there is no secret ingredient to being great. There is just you. And that's the major theme of Kung Fu Panda 1. Now, what turns a movie like Kung Fu Panda 1 from being just good to great is how the major theme is reflected in its villain. So let's look at Tai Lung and how his journey mirrors Po. Before continuing on, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Factor's team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. You'll never have to worry about getting bored of these meals because there are over 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie smart, vegan plus veggie, and more. If you're someone like me who wants to spend more time watching all the movies and shows we love, or you want to spend more time watching Goldman videos, then Factor is perfect for you. What I love about Factor is the amount of time that is freed up in your life by signing up. There's nothing worse than coming home from a long day's work and having to prepare your dinner, cook it, and then clean all your pots and pans. With Factor, all you need to do is open your fridge, put your meal in the microwave for only 2 minutes, and you're ready to enjoy your restaurant quality meal. Trust me, it's good. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code TheGoldman50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Again, that's factor75.com. The promo code is TheGoldman50 for 50% off your first Factor box. Link is in the description below. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this video. Tai Lung, in a way, is the complete opposite of Po, but is also the exact same. We learned that that as a kid, Tai Lung was told he had the potential for greatness. All his life he was trained and trained so he could live up to those expectations. Shifu raised him like his own son, with love and compassion. Tai Lung was even told that he could become the Dragon Warrior. When the time came, however, he was told that he wasn't worthy of the title. What did his master do when all his dreams were crushed? Nothing. He didn't stand up for the boy he adopted. He just stood there and accepted what happened. This backstory showed us how, just like expectations hindered Po, they ruined Tai Lung. Tai Lung never asked to be a kung fu prodigy. He never asked to be destined for greatness. But now that he is not given the Dragon Scroll, the ultimate symbol of greatness, he sees himself as a failure. But unlike Po, who accepted the idea early in his life that he could never be great, Tai Lung let this consume him. He refused to settle for anything less than the best. He destroyed a whole village, showing how strong and how great of a fighter he really was, only for him to be imprisoned for 20 years. I love how in the beginning of the film, the storytellers want you to believe that Tai Lung is indeed great because of how good of a fighter he is. The escape sequence from the prison was not only a brilliant action set piece, but it did indeed set the audience's expectations of how dangerous Tai Lung can be. He even manages to go against the Furious Five alone and defeat them. What the movies in this trilogy do so well is that they develop the villains all throughout the movie. A lot of movies could have just stopped at the exposition dump of why the villain is bad, but not Kung Fu Panda. When Tai Lung returns and chats with Shifu, we get a look into the real Tai Lung. He doesn't just talk about getting the scroll. He talks about how he did all of this just to make Shifu proud. Just like any kid, Tai Lung wanted nothing more than his dad to be proud of him, but he mistakenly believed that not being the Dragon Warrior meant that Shifu wasn't proud. The weight of that expectation destroyed Tai Lung, but this was also a failure on Shifu's part. Had Shifu given Tai Lung the reassurance that he needed, then maybe nothing bad would have happened. If Shifu told Tai Lung, "You have the potential to be great, but if you aren't, I will still love you," then Tai Lung probably would have never spiraled into darkness. This movie teaches kids that sometimes unfair expectations are thrusted upon you, and that it's not your fault. In one of the more emotional scenes in the movie, Shifu apologizes to Tai Lung. He tells Tai Lung that he was always proud of him and he's sorry for turning Tai Lung into the man that he became. A lot of people have pointed out the excellent animation of Tai Lung's face here, how hard this moment hit him and how taken aback he is by it. But it's too late. Tai Lung is too far gone. He still wants the scroll more than anything. But now he doesn't want the scroll so he can make them proud. He wants it just to spite his former masters, to prove them wrong that he was worthy this entire time. Even though Shifu apologizes at this moment in the story, I think he learned this lesson after Po first tried to quit. Maybe deep down, Shifu didn't want to let Po down the same way he let Tai Lung down. That is why, along with the guidance of Oogway, he sticks with Po and learns to train him the right way. After the failure of Tai Lung, Shifu craved control of everything so he wouldn't fail someone again. If he controlled every aspect of his students, then they would never turn dark like Tai Lung did. He lost that joy he had of being a master. But this all changed when Po arrived, someone who forced Shifu to reconsider and adapt as a master. Kung Fu Panda is of course about learning and being a student, but it's also about masters and teaching, because that is arguably just as important. I think the inclusion of Shifu's arc in this film is why the story relates to adults just as much as kids, because watching this movie as a kid, we relate more to Po, but watching it as an adult, we also relate to Shifu and his struggles. It's a brilliant way to tell a story that is for kids. We then get to the climax of the film, and it's pretty much just Po versus Tai Lung. One thing that stood out to me during this fight is that until he gets the Dragon Scroll, Tai Lung isn't really attacking Po. He just keeps going after the scroll. His tunnel vision and obsession with the scroll has blinded him from the fact that if he just dealt with Po, then he would have gotten the scroll so easily. Regardless, he still does end up getting the scroll, only to see that it is blank. Unfortunately, Tai Lung can't accept that he is already great, and that is why he loses to Po. Kung Fu Panda 1 is a story about expectations and acceptance. It teaches us how expectations can destroy people, especially when those expectations are to be great. But more importantly than that, it teaches us that there is no singular definition of greatness. It teaches us that anyone can be great. You just need to accept yourself. The single ingredient to greatness is your heart. The only person who can define you is you. Before I continue on with the rest of this video, only 8% of viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. If Kung Fu Panda 1 was about finding who you are by accepting your present, then Kung Fu Panda 2 is about finding who you are by accepting your past. So Kung Fu Panda 2 pretty much begins shortly after the first movie, and Po appears to have everything he's ever wanted. He still is goofy old self, he still has lessons from Shifu, but most importantly, he gets to save his village fighting alongside the Furious Five. One of the most important lessons a sequel can teach someone is that you don't just conquer your demons once and that's it. Life is an ongoing battle. There will be new challenges you'll have to face, but how you continue to fight them will determine what kind of person you are. Po thinks he's conquered all his demons until one moment where he freezes in battle. There's a brief reminder of his past, and Po tries to brush it off like nothing happened. In the first movie, I mentioned how Po struggled with the expectations he had in life. Now, in the second movie, he struggles with the expectations he has of being the Dragon Warrior. It's not often referenced in the second and third films, but remember, the Dragon Warrior was a prophesized being for hundreds of years. With this much expectation, whomever the Dragon Warrior is, they will be the pinnacle of strength. They will show no weakness, no flaws. They are the perfect warrior. Po accepted himself physically in the first movie, but what about mentally? After the first encounter with Shen's soldiers, Po asks his dad questions about his real parents. All Po's dad can say, however, is that he found Po one day in a basket and had no clue how he got there. The lack of answers here haunts Po. Did his parents love him? Did they abandon him? As the Dragon Warrior, however, he can't afford to ask himself these questions. There's a mission he needs to go on, and Po will be the perfect kung fu fighter. There's a scene in the first third of the movie where, after waking up from a nightmare of his past, Po goes outside to try and find inner peace, but he can't do it. Tigress helps Po fight and talks about how she doesn't have feeling in her hands from decades of training and fighting. Po admires Tigress's ability to be the perfect fighter. She is always so cold and tough. She never shows any weakness and never shows any vulnerability. Po's view of toughness is what Tigress is, so he tries to portray strength and courage by hiding his true feelings. You can already start to see the similarities between this film and the first film. In both films, Po begins the movie by pretending to be someone he isn't. You may say this is just repeating the first movie, but again, I disagree. Kids need to learn that you will struggle with your self-image all throughout life. It's something you will have to keep working on. After a long action sequence where Po and the Furious Five fight through a village and fight Shen, Po again freezes at the symbol that reminds him of his past. One of the more powerful moments in this scene is right after the battle. Tigress tells Po he needs to stay behind. We assume the reason is because he keeps freezing and Tigress doesn't trust him. Po continues to act all tough, saying he can handle it. But for maybe the first time in the series, Tigress shows vulnerability. She gives Po a hug and tells him she doesn't want to see him get hurt. This moment stuns Po because it's the first time Tigress broke this facade of perfection. I love this moment because it's deconstructing in Po's mind what it means to portray strength. Po, however, hasn't learned this lesson yet, and he still decides to go confront Shen, where he loses and gets shot into a river and then floats down it until he's found by the soothsayer. I'll be honest, this scene here was when I realized this movie was special. The soothsayer tells Po he must accept what happened to him. He must let the memory play out in his mind and accept the pain that comes with reliving that memory. A brilliant decision the director made was when the animation changed from 2D to 3D. All series, whenever we get 2D animation, it usually means it's either a dream Po is having or it's exposition. It's more of an illustration of what one thinks happened rather than what actually happened. However, to illustrate that Po is finally accepting what happened to him, the flashback transitions from 2D to 3D. This is what really happened to Po. I almost teared up here. The first movie was really good, but it didn't touch me so deep on an emotional level like this movie did. What Kung Fu Panda 2 teaches us is that in order to accept trauma, you have to deal with pain. Processing those emotions is not easy and it will hurt. Portraying emotionless strength and bottling up your emotions is far easier, but you will never have inner peace. Po shows us that it is okay to feel pain. It's okay to accept that pain as a part of you. Pain is not something that makes you weak, but most importantly, pain isn't something that defines you. I love the line from the soothsayer where she says, "It's the rest of your story that defines who you are." That might be the best quote in the trilogy. This isn't even just a lesson for kids, it's a lesson for anyone. Most people don't realize that the deepest scars are the ones you can't see. Everyone has those scars and we think it defines us. That shame of whatever happened in the past prevents us from moving forward. Kung Fu Panda 2 argues it doesn't. It's in fact a part of us, but it doesn't determine who who we can become, and it especially shouldn't distract you from those who love you right now. In this moment here, Po is able to find inner peace. He has accepted that pain from his past. He has felt his feelings. The third act begins, and of course we get another battle. Po and the Furious Five fight, and even Shifu shows up. The climax of the movie, however, is when Po stands alone and faces down the entirety of Shen's army. Po has no weapons, no secret ingredient that prepared him for this moment. All he did was accept the pain of his past, and now he has inner peace. Is it a little ridiculous that Po can now catch a cannon blast because he found inner peace? Sure, but the reason I love movies like these, or more specifically moments like these, is because the thematic message is far more important than the believability of the moment. Po here is able to destroy pretty much the entirety of Shen's army, and in a moment of defeat, Shen cannot understand how Po was able to find inner peace. Po says that scars don't matter and that only what you do now matters. Frankly, I wish Po worded this differently, because your scars absolutely do matter. It's just that they don't define who you become. Either way, the movie illustrated its message effectively. For the second movie in a row, the main villain cannot possibly comprehend the theme of the movie, and it leads to their defeat. Po's arc was again beautiful. It taught us a valuable lesson about pain and scars, and I love that message. This movie illustrates its theme through its villain as well. So let's take a look at Shen. Just like how Tai Lung was a mirror of Po in Kung Fu Panda 1, Shen is a mirror of Po in this movie. Shen's backstory began with him being banished by his parents. After using fireworks as a weapon rather than for celebration, Shen's parents hired a soothsayer to see what was in Shen's future, and it was foretold he would be destroyed by a being of black and white. Because of this, Shen went to a panda village to massacre as many pandas as he could. This is what led to Shen's banishment, a moment that would define him forever. Like Po in this film, Shen wanted to portray strength by bottling up his emotions. He felt great pain from the thought of his parents not loving him, so to cope with that, he just wanted to take over all of China. Just like how Tai Lung wanted the approval of his master, Shen wanted the approval of his parents. He took his parents' creation and created something new with it. However, his parents didn't approve. When he massacred a village to show how strong he was and how he had control of his destiny, his parents didn't approve. Both times Shen wanted to please his parents, it ended up backfiring. So with his parents gone, Shen returns home to begin his conquest of all of China. What I really like about Shen's story is his dynamic with Po compared to Tai Lung's and Kai's dynamic with Po. Tai Lung and Kai fought Po because he was the dragon warrior. Shen, on the other hand, doesn't really care that Po is the dragon warrior. He only cares about Po because Po is a panda. Instead of attacking Po because of a title he has, he's attacking Po because of his identity. It makes Shen's dynamic with Po far more personal, which makes the conversations they have with each other a lot more interesting. The first time Shen meets Po, he is fearful of his destiny. He copes with this by mocking Po. Po doesn't even realize what happened to his people, and this amuses Shen. The next time they fight, we get one of the cruelest moments of the trilogy. After Po asks Shen what happened in the past, Shen tells Po that his parents didn't love him and that they abandoned him. At first, I was gonna say Shen lied, but I don't know that he did lie. There's a great quote out there that highlights the difference between a hero and a villain. A hero uses the pain of their past and wants no one else to ever feel that pain. A villain uses the pain of their past and wants others to feel that pain too. Whether or not Shen was lying, Shen tells Po that his parents never loved him because he knows how much pain that can cause a person. To Shen, there is nothing more painful than your parents not loving you, so he uses that pain and tries to destroy Po. The reason I'm not convinced that Shen was lying is because what if he believes that a parent would never send you away out of love? We know that Po's mom hid Po away so he could be safe, but what if Shen isn't capable of thinking that way? What if Shen believes if a parent loves you, they will never abandon you? Regardless, Shen makes sure that Po feels that pain. By the end of the movie, when Po defeats Shen, Shen is left stunned. He knows that Po had a similar past, and he knows that Po has felt that same pain of abandonment, but Po stands across from his entire fleet and shows nothing but inner peace. How could this be? Shen tormented Po all movie. He told Po the worst thing anyone could hear. He even admitted to Po that he was responsible for the death of his loved ones. How could Po just stand here so calm and peaceful? Again, just like Tai Lung, Shen cannot wrap his head around the theme of the movie, and that unwillingness to let go of that pain leads to his downfall. Shen's story is one of tragedy. All he wanted was his parents' approval, but it led him down a path of anger and rage. I love the moment where the soothsayer tells Shen that his parents did love him. It's like the moment where Shifu told Tai Lung that he was proud of him. Even though it's the thing each character always wanted to hear, it's too late. They are too far down this path. Shen is also a victim of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Shen learned that he would be defeated by a being of black and white, so he went and massacred a village of pandas. That massacre, however, led to Po being sent to a different village, where he inevitably became the Dragon Warrior and defeated Shen anyway. What I really like about this story, however, is that this is just one interpretation. At the end of the movie, it's not Po who strikes the final blow to kill Shen. It was Shen's own device that crushes him. Mind you, Shen is also a being of black and white. He has some red in him, but he is predominantly black and white. Was it Po who fulfilled the prophecy, or was it Shen who destroyed himself? I'll let you guys decide. Kung Fu Panda 2 is a movie that teaches you the importance of feeling your feelings, that it's important to feel that pain of your trauma, that it's okay that these things happen to you and that you're not weak for feeling pain. But most importantly, Kung Fu Panda 2 teaches us that you are not defined by your past. That, as the soothsayer said, it's the rest of your story that defines who you are. Kung Fu Panda 3 is noticeably the weakest of the trilogy. I wouldn't say it is a bad film because there is a lot to learn from this movie, as I'll get to in a second, but the stark difference between the first two films and the third film is the villain. Kai is just not on the same level as Tai Lung or Shen. So before I discuss Po and his arc, let's discuss Kai and what makes him a less compelling villain than his counterparts. What made Tai Lung and Shen work so well was that they were a mirror of Po. In the first movie, Po was someone who struggled with the expectations put on him, and Tai Lung was the same. The second movie, Po was struggling with his past. Shen was struggling with the same thing. Having these villains that mirrored Po so well allowed the writers to convey the theme more effectively. Po was better off because he practiced the message of the story, and the villains were worse off because they could not accept the message of the story. Kung Fu Panda 3 to me was about learning to pass on what you have learned. Po has to learn to teach others, and that is how Kai is defeated. Kai, on the other hand, doesn't really reflect that theme. Sure, you could say he didn't want to teach anyone. In fact, he's the opposite because he's actively taking away people's chi while Po is giving people chi. But the reason Kai loses at the end of the film is not because he doesn't teach anyone else. It's just because Po did teach others. In the other two films, the climax was a mix of Po accepting the theme and the villain rejecting it. In this movie, it's just Po accepting it that allowed him to win in the end. So from that perspective, Kai doesn't have the emotional weight behind his arc. Kai is also nowhere near as three-dimensional as Tai Lung or Shen. When we look at all three villains, they essentially all just want power. But Tai Lung wanted power so he could prove to his masters how worthy he was. Shen wanted power to hide the pain he felt from his banishment. With Kai, there is no deeper reason for wanting power. He just wants power. We get a backstory of how Kai and Oogway found the pandas and how they were great teachers of chi. Kai is then said to have found the ability to take others' chis away, and that is why he was banished to the spirit realm. But what were the motivations behind Kai wanting to take others' chi away? It appears that Kai just wanted this power because it made him powerful. No deeper reason that allows us to take a deep look into his character. Not every villain needs a traumatic past that motivates them, but they should have a deeper reason for their motivations. Another reason that Kai lacks the depth that the other villains do is because of his lack of connection to our characters. With Tai Lung, his fight with Shifu was personal. With Shen, his fight with Po was personal. And because each of those two characters had a personal relationship to one of our main characters, it allowed moments for us to see the vulnerability in each character. Like when Shifu told Tai Lung that he was always proud of him, or when the soothsayer told Shen that his parents did love him. Is there any moment like that with Kai? He has a personal relationship with Oogway, but he defeats Oogway in the beginning of the film. For the rest of the film, he is just sending ghosts of other characters to attack Po, and then confronts Po himself at the end of the film. What if Kai was one of Oogway's first students? After Oogway taught him everything he knew, Kai sought more power for himself and learned how to steal chi. Kai never wanted to share his knowledge, so he never took on a disciple of his own. Because Kai never wanted to pass on his knowledge, Oogway took on another student in Shifu. Shifu inevitably did pass on what he learned to the Furious Five, Po, and Tai Lung. Because of this, Oogway favored Shifu, and this made Kai jealous. For the rest of the film, Kai wants to defeat all of Shifu's students as a way to prove he was the best student of Oogway. But at the end of the film, film, Po is able to take Kai into the spirit realm because of the Wuxi fingerhold, something that Oogway taught Shifu and Shifu taught Po. So Kai is ultimately defeated because of knowledge that was passed on from teacher to student. I think a little rewrite like that allows for Kai to become a more interesting character, and he would mirror Po's story. But as the film currently stands, Kai is a cool looking villain who has interesting powers, but he lacks the depth that Tai Lung and Shen had. Moving on from Kai, let's look at Po's journey and what lessons Kung Fu Panda 3 tries to teach us. As I said before, this movie has a theme about passing on what you have learned. Early in the film, Shifu challenges Po with teaching the rest of the Furious Five, and Po doesn't like this. Po doesn't want the responsibility. He just wants to be the Dragon Warrior and nothing more. There's this conversation that Shifu has where he tells Po he needs to discover who he is. Frankly, I don't like this wording. For one, it's the exact phrase I'm pretty sure that was used in the past 2 films, so it doesn't need to be here. But Shifu does give this great quote saying, "If you only do what you can do, then you will never be more than you are now." It's a great quote telling Po basically that if you want to grow as a person, you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And the way Shifu wants to accomplish this is by Po becoming a teacher. After this, Po's biological dad shows up and Po is ecstatic. However, he loves this not just because he's glad to have met his biological father, he subconsciously loves this because it puts him in the position of a student again. Lee tells Po that he wants to take Po back to his village and teach him what it means to truly be a panda. And for the plot, he will teach Po how to master chi. This is the position that Po is the most comfortable in, so he gladly accepts. For a good portion of the movie, Po pretty much just learns what it's like to be a panda. Whenever Po asks his father to teach him chi, Lee keeps on lying and making excuses. Even though Po loves spending time with his father, the burden of being the Dragon Warrior still weighs on him. He has to learn chi because if he doesn't, then Kai will defeat him. Unlike the last 2 films where Po had everything he needed all along to win, he just needed to realize it, in this film, Po needs to learn a new skill. So when Lee tells Po that he doesn't know chi and that he lied to him just to keep Po safe, Po's devastated. Not just because he was lied to, but because it puts him in a position he's never been in before. What I love about the end of this film is that Po learns the same lesson that Shifu learned in the first film. Shifu had to learn to adapt his teaching strategy to fit Po. He taught Po differently than he had any of his other students. He used food. Po takes that same lesson from Shifu and trains the entire panda village in preparation for Kai's attack. He feeds into each one of the panda's strengths, and that is how they end up defeating Kai. Because Po put faith into the other pandas, they were able to give him their chi when he needed it the most in the spirit realm. This film found a new way for Po to grow. It put him in a position of authority, and frankly, I love that. I said earlier that Kung Fu Panda 3 is the weakest of the trilogy, and while I stand by that statement wholeheartedly, this film still has a lot to love. I really liked the direction they chose to take Po in this movie. Frankly, it's a great progression of his character, and it puts him in a good position to grow even further in Kung Fu Panda 4. Sure, the villain of this film was kinda weak, and sure, the pacing here wasn't as great as the other 2 films, but Kung Fu Panda 3 is still a solid entry into this trilogy and caps it off with a satisfying arc for Po. The Kung Fu Panda Trilogy is overall a great trilogy. Even for 3 films that were made for kids, the writers put so much thought and effort into making these films truly special. I want to take some time, however, to discuss the notion of these being kids' films, because surprisingly enough, people debate whether these films are for kids or not. If you're not familiar with my channel, I have made a lot of videos on both the Star Wars franchise and the Avatar franchise. Even though the creators of both franchises have openly come out and said their respective stories are for kids,
you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
people still argue saying they are not for kids. I made this video on Star Wars The Clone Wars, and in it I said the show was for kids. People freaked out and told me how it's not for kids. Look at the violence. And then they tag compilation videos of the violence in the show. I've always been fascinated by this insecurity people have because they like something that is for kids. It's not for kids, it's for everyone, is something people often say. Yes, that is true. Stories like Star Wars or Kung Fu Panda are for everyone, but their primary audience is for kids. Now, does this mean that these stories are lesser than adult stories? No, it does not. Kids' stories are allowed to have just as much to say as adult stories. People just look at the levels of violence and use that as the determinant factor in whether or not a show or movie is for kids. Like in The Clone Wars, people point to the scene of Ahsoka decapitating a handful of people as reasons for pointing out why the show is not for kids. Even though each person she decapitated was wearing a helmet, we don't actually see their heads come off, and it takes place in a foggy room. People think think that kids' stories are just these Mickey Mouse shows on the Disney Channel. No, you guys vastly underestimate what a kid can handle. When we look at the Kung Fu Panda trilogy, the films tackle themes of abuse, genocide, trauma, abandonment, body insecurity, and so much more. Children can understand these concepts. Just because there is a lot of Chinese philosophy built into these films that kids may not understand, that doesn't mean that children aren't still the primary audience. What makes a story for kids is mostly about the lessons they teach and how they teach them. The Kung Fu Panda movies are all movies about growth and accepting who you are and finding your place in the world. The first film is how parental figures often damage their children with the expectations they put on them. It's a coming-of-age story where Po learns what he wants in life and pursues it. What makes these films for kids is the presentation around the messages. The fat jokes and the childish humor is only a part of what makes these films for kids. It's also conveying the message in a way that kids can easily understand. I feel like we often dismiss the label of for kids because we assume that the lessons the film teaches can only be for kids. That if a 30-year-old relates to the message of a kid's story, that they are somehow behind in life or that they should have already learned that lesson. That's not the case. The themes of these films can be learned by anyone. You are not behind in life if you're 50 years old and you relate to the theme of accepting your trauma in Kung Fu Panda 2. What makes these films for kids is that kids can relate to them too, so they can maybe learn the same lessons by the time they're your age. What do you guys think? Is the Kung Fu Panda trilogy a masterpiece? Is it overrated? Or is it somewhere in between? Let me know down below. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to like the Claude Squad, and I will see you guys next time.